is used. And so we have to evaluate the context in which a word is used. For example, Genesis chapter 1. The Hebrew word for day appears. And that Hebrew word has multiple meanings. I picked up a tract by the Jehovah's Witnesses, and by the way, I don't have anything against Jehovah's Witnesses necessarily, but I picked up a tract for the Jehovah's Witnesses that talked about it was what we consider the gap theory, or a long creation. Basically, this theory was that there was an indeterminate amount of time based on the Hebrew word day. That Hebrew word day contains three meanings. It can mean daytime, meaning the sunny portion of the day. It can mean a 24-hour day, or it can mean an indeterminate period of time determined only by the context in which it's written. Now, this Jehovah's Witness tract had decided that, hey, we can fit evolution and creation in the same Bible. And they said that the word day in the book of Genesis meant an indeterminate period of time, and so therefore the world evolved slowly over this, quote, day. Now the problem with that is, the Bible clearly states in Genesis chapter 1, evening and the morning followed the first day. And so that gives us the context in which it is a 24-hour day. Sheol is like that. Yeah, it may be used, and we have to evaluate the context in which it is used to find out if it is eternal hell or if it is a place for departed souls. A temporary waiting place, I might say. And so the context, before I click my button too soon, but before we go on, let's look at the book of Psalms for a moment. Psalm 16, for example. Psalm 16, and let's look at verse 10. Again, our focus is not on eternal hell, but our focus is on the place of departed souls. And in Psalm 16, verse 10, David writes, "For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption." David is saying that his soul is not going, of course, this is a prophetic psalm, but I think David is using this in two terms, both his personal soul, but also the soul of Jesus. He says, you are not going to allow my eternal soul to remain in Sheol. Therefore, we can come to the conclusion that since hell is eternal, this then is the Sheol reference for a waiting place. Now, the book of Acts chapter 2. Let's go back here because I believe it's used again here in the book of Acts, chapter 2. I think this is referenced here. Acts chapter 2 and verse 31. And Luke records for us, Acts 2:31 says, "For he foresaw and spoke about the resurrection of Christ, that he was not abandoning to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption." Now I want to introduce you to that New Testament word Hades. Luke is quoting from Psalm 16 verse 10. Only he uses the Greek word Hades. Hades is also a place of departed souls. Hades is never used for eternal hell. Gehenna is the term that is used in the New Testament for eternal hell, if my memory is correct. Hades is not. Hades is a waiting place for souls awaiting judgment. temporary place. The Bible doesn't give us a lot of information on Hades or Sheol. I'll call it Hades for our sake, because I believe it's easier for us to wrap our minds around a word that's only used for one specific application. But the Bible doesn't give us a lot of details. So there's some gray area here, but we'll look at what we have. The word Hades is found 9 or 10 times. There is some question about Matthew chapter 16, verse 18 in the original text, what the original text was. However, 9 or 10 times in the New Testament. Most simply refer to Hades as a place, making reference to its existence. They don't give us a description, much like Acts chapter 2 and what we read there a moment ago. Peter tells us that Jesus' soul went to Hades before his body was raised there in Acts chapter 2, verse 31. We're not going to go back there. Also, Psalm 16, verse 10. We looked at both of those passages that tell us that Jesus' body, or Jesus' soul, went to Hades. So you know what that means? That means Jesus died. That means there was a separation. His soul departed from his body. His body was then laid in the tomb. He was dead. All over. Dead. In the book of Revelation, because of what was prophesied by David, or God through the mouth of David, maybe that'd be a better way to look at that. Jesus overcame death. Jesus controls Hades. In fact, Revelation chapter 1, verse 18, John says, as he's quoting Jesus, begin in verse 17 with me so we get the context. When I saw him, I fell at his feet and as though dead, not that John is dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. I have the keys. I have the keys of death and Hades. Jesus has the key. I find that just so fascinating. Jesus has the key. The most vivid description that you can find of Hades appears in Luke chapter 16. We'll go back there very quickly. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time trying to describe a place that we really have little description of. So I will read you the text, and you can determine for yourself. Luke chapter 16, and I believe this is an account. Some folks will argue that this is a parable, and if it is a parable, it does not change the meaning of the parable, but I believe this passage is a direct account. Luke 16, begin with me in verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. At his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered in sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes. Now both are in Hades. You'll notice that Abraham also is here. The poor man, though, is by Abraham's side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue. For I am in anguish in these flames. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you is a great chasm, which has been fixed in order that those who would pass from here to you are not able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they come to this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. He said, No, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to them, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Okay, so just basically, I want you to think of this as a 2-part section. There is a part of Hades that is comfortable. There is a part of Hades that is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And there is a partition, chasm, void, canyon between the 2 sections. We can have that in mind. I think that's pretty well fixed. I also think that we can read more into this than what the text actually has. So again, we need to be cautious. Bible scholars and Christians have disputed this passage. I said that I believe it is a parable, or not a parable, but reality. There's been debate about that. But this we know. There are 2 parts, like I mentioned. One of torment, the other of rest and peace. We know that a person's soul cannot pass from one part to the other.